Welcome to the Boss Mode Podcast, where we discuss AI and the future of work. Welcome back to the Boss Mode Podcast. I'm your host, David Lee, and today I am here with Dr. Adam Link of Fireweed Capital. Adam is a former software engineer who moved into the realm of finance management. Looking forward to learning from you, Adam, and having an interesting conversation today.
Thank you, David. It's great to be on.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show. So Adam, tell me, Fireweed Capital, why Fireweed? What is Fireweed?
Oh, that's a great story. So fireweed is actually a plant. Um, it, the actual physical plant.
Invasive?
So some people think of it's invasive. It's actually a non-invasive plant in much of the U.S. and northern U.S. It's highly regarded for its natural medicine qualities. And I first found the fireweed plant when I lived up in Alaska. This is something we didn't talk about before we started the show here, but yeah, I lived in Alaska for 3 years and really fell in love with the mountains covered in fireweed that you see up there. So named my company after it. And, Fireweed Capital, it's kind of a unique name. Most financial services firms are really big into blue and green color schemes. And we have a magenta color scheme. So really took everything that a financial services firm should be according to the industry and turned it on its head. And that's really been, part of our investment philosophy as well. And, our color scheme and our name really tried to take as much of the unique journey that I took to get to starting Fireweed and really imbue that into the brand.
Really important to be able to take a contrarian position and be willing to flip things on their head. Is that like a default state for you, or are you deliberate and selective about when and where you choose to flip things on its head?
Yeah. I think as a software engineer, my default is optimization, right? Anyone who's written code for a living knows that we go through a lot of training to learn the proper algorithms to apply at any given point in time. And we really refine algorithms until they are as optimal as possible, right? So I really came from a background of let's go ahead and try to optimize every potential problem. And what I found was in the markets, you can't really optimize the markets. There's just too many variables. And so I said, okay, well, look, if optimization doesn't work, what does? And it actually turns out that the most optimal way to approach the financial markets is through a contrarian position. And that's not to say that, if the market goes up, I immediately say, well, you should sell the market, right? That's a naive contrarian position. But the idea of
There's the nuance.
Exactly. Yep. The idea of saying, okay, well, look, if everyone else says the market's going to go up, why are they saying that? Where could they be wrong? Where can you push on a hypothesis and find a weak point? And within that is kind of how we built our active management investment philosophy at Fireweed.
Yeah, so you say active management, and for our listeners who are less fluent in this language, I'll point to something that you were sharing with me just before we hopped on this call, how many folks think that it's ideal to do passive investing, such as parking your money in index funds, and I imagine mutual funds would be another type of passive investing, and just letting them manage it for you without having an active hand in it, without throwing a wrench in things and mixing things up too often. Probably a more conservative approach. In the long run, certainly, as I understand it, it's a reliable path to growth over kind of a multi-decade period. But do you look at active investing, active management, because you want to be having an impact on a shorter time frame, or is it something else?
Yeah, so I think it gets back to a debate that I've had with other financial advisors on the benefits of diversification versus concentration. So let's talk briefly about diversification and concentration. And then we'll talk about how that applies to passive indexing versus an active management approach. So one of the biggest, I'd say, points driven home in personal finance is that diversification is key. And what diversification means is, look, rather than putting all your money in, let's say, Microsoft, put your money in the broad market. And the idea behind that,
don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. There's no guarantee that Microsoft will exist as a company in 10 years, right? There's no guarantee that they won't be sued. There's no guarantee that, Washington won't suddenly drop off the face of the map, right? There's a lot of risk if you put all your money in a single company. Now, what we're told then is, well, if you can't predict the future of a single company, diversify. And there's academic studies here that, show the best you can do is diversify across, 20 or 30 different companies. And now you're effectively, if you diversify well, holding enough of the market that it doesn't really matter what any one individual company does. And people have taken this to the extreme and said, well, look, if 20 is good, then 300 is better, then 2,000 is better. Therefore, let's buy the entire market, the broadest possible market we can buy, right? And what that basically does is it says, I do not know what the future is going to do. Therefore, I'm going to put my money everywhere, and I won't get stung by any particular negative event. But the flip side is also true. I will not benefit from any particular positive event, right? So if you think about diversification in the broadest sense, you would never benefit as much as somebody who put all their money in NVIDIA 2 years ago, right? It's a huge risky play, but that one really paid off. Now, there's no guarantee everything's going to pay off, right? So that's diversification. Now, what's concentration? Diversification is great if you don't want to lose money. That's really the point of diversification, right? Don't lose what I've got. The problem is you also don't gain. So concentration is when you start taking directional bets and saying, I think that I have some unique viewpoint or some unique information or some unique hypothesis that if I put more of my eggs in one basket, I believe that it will pay off. Now, the most extreme version of this is like the lottery, right? If I buy enough tickets, maybe I hit the jackpot and I can turn $2 into $1 billion, right? That is an extreme version of concentration. And I certainly don't recommend folks go out and buy lottery tickets, right? But that's like the idea of extreme concentration, right? So on one end, I have no idea what's going to happen. Let's buy everything. On the other hand, I know exactly what's going to win. Let's put as much as we can into the winning pot, right? So
that's why it's actually quite different from, you describe a lottery ticket as an example of extreme concentration. I might say that it's more an example of extreme risk reward and less about concentration, because you could put $1 out of your overall blend into it,
right?
And that's actually diversification.
Yeah, I think then a better example for concentration would be if you look at what Warren Buffett actually does. Everyone thinks that Warren Buffett is a great stock picker, and he's made all his money in the stock markets. What Warren Buffett actually does is acquire companies and then make them better from an operating standpoint, right? So he goes in and he doesn't buy the stock. What he does is he buys the company and then uses influence to boost that publicly traded stock, right? Through better operations, through better management, through a better capital structure, right? And so that is a concentrated bet, right? That is saying, I'm going to put a lot of my money in a single place. And in Warren Buffett's case, he puts his finger on the scales through operating in a way.
Which is why Geico is so expensive, by the way.
Yes, exactly, right? I mean, so that's, yeah, there is a component of what Warren Buffett does that you and I cannot do, which is we don't get to go sit on the board of a company that we bought, right? If you buy shares in IBM, they're not going to invite you onto their board, right? So we've kind of identified then a little bit of what this concentration component is, right? Which is, I'm going to put more of my eggs in one basket because I have a hypothesis that if it plays out and I'm right, I make more money, right? And so those are kind of the two sides of the coin when it comes to investing in the markets. Are you investing in the markets for diversification to keep your money there? Or are you investing in the markets on a more concentrated basis in an attempt to grow your wealth? So where does
the challenge with concentration, though, I imagine, is it comes back to the operative word that you were using earlier around active management. Active means I'm actively allocating brain cycles, maybe mine or somebody else's. So my brain cycles or an advisor's brain cycles towards on an ongoing basis, actively thinking about day in, day out, what the right concentration is, what the right blend is. And I think therein lies the challenge, the dilemma, because for a lot of folks who are early in their careers, there's a lot to be said for focusing their brain cycles on themselves creating something of value to themselves or for others. And for those whose, I guess, gift to the world and their contribution to productive society is kind of adaptation, improvement of innovation in financial management, then sure, active management makes a ton of sense for those individuals. For those individuals who have just a massive, like a buttload of cash, and they don't mind paying the fees in the near term during the active management phase, during the ups and the downs, it makes sense for them as well. But for those who are early or mid-career, they need to kind of stretch every dollar. Does it make sense for them to look at active management? Does some of this come down to what your risk tolerance is and how much bandwidth you have, and how much cash you have?
Yes, well, there's a ton of very good questions inside of what you just asked. So let me try to unpack them a little bit here.
That's your polite way of saying that I'm like wildly disorganized in my thinking, because I'm a layperson here and I am not an expert in this domain.
Yeah, no, you asked like four great questions, and I really want to address all of them at the same time, right? So okay, let me see if I can start kind of ticking through the thought process here, because it's a great thought process. And I'll start out by saying, yes, active means someone has to watch your money, right? So cut to the chase. Obviously, I work in wealth management. Guess what I do, right? I take people who don't have the time but have the money, and I actively manage their money for them. Okay, so that's the easy one, right? So what do you do if you don't have the time and you got the money? You hire me. Okay, there's the sales pitch. Now, beyond that, right? What do you do if you have the money and the time, right? So certainly active management is taking a position on the markets and saying, I think I can understand where the markets might go. I see indications of an expansion cycle, so I'm going to position my portfolio in such a way that I benefit from expansion, right?
Now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Bringing my vision into reality requires focus. But the reality for an entrepreneur is that there's just so much work to be done. Finance, customer support, and marketing. Vanka AI is the agentic co-founder that cuts the mundane out of the founder's day-to-day. If you're a founder or business operator who values your time, you really need to sign up right away at www.vanka.ai.
And there's no reason you have to hire a financial advisor to do that if you have a model that works and you've got the time, right? The only difference between David, you and me is I'm passionate about this and I've got a license from the US government and I can get paid to do this legally, right? But if you're passionate about this and you want to manage your own money actively, great. Like that's active management on your own money. Now, what do you do if you have no time and no inclination for looking at the stock market, right? Well, that's where the passive indexing comes in, and it's very popular because over decades, the markets do generally trend up. Now, if you don't like the idea of over decades, the markets trend up and you want to take a slightly different ride, then you start looking at active management, right? And you say, look, I think the markets trend up, but I really want to avoid that 30% drawdown that we see every 3 to 4 years in the markets. And so you move to active management where we seek to avoid that drawdown. You asked a second question in there of, is this for people new in their career? And I think what you hit on was actually a really great point about economics. So if you'll allow me a slight digression here into economics, basically what you asked was a concept of comparative advantage, which is, as someone new in my career, what should I be doing with my time, right? For every marginal extra minute that I have, what should I do with that? Should I be learning a new skill like investing my money? Or should I be sharpening the saw and increasing my current skill set that I'm selling to my employer, right? And for someone new in their career, what I would say, and this is career advice from someone who's been around for a decade in tech, spend the time being a better programmer, right? Because at the end of the day, the gift that you give to the world is programming. And this is the annoying part to many programmers because we are excellent at all things computer and by extension, most things tech. And most of the world runs on tech. So by extension, like we're pretty good at most things as long as there's a computer screen in front of us. It doesn't really matter what the domain is. Well, in finance, that's great, but go hire an expert, go hire a financial advisor, and then work on being a much better programmer, right? That's your comparative advantage in economics. It basically says, do what you're best at and hire out for the things that you are not the absolute best at. So early in your career, right, that's really what you should be doing in your 20s, right? Focus on where you can make the most potential money.
Now, to that point, I would actually bring us back to something you said earlier. You said if you don't have the time, but you do have the money. So in the example you just gave, if you're a software engineer at a FANG or a Magnificent Seven company, so you don't have a lot of time because you're investing in yourself to become a better software engineer and increase your RSUs, increase your comp, make sure you're maxing out on that bonus, and also really genuinely becoming a better programmer that's having an impact on the world, making software that is improving lives, making things more efficient, all that good stuff. And you have a decent amount of money because software engineers at Mag 7, they're paid fairly well, especially when you take their RSUs into consideration. So those individuals, you said, hire Adam, hire me. But I'd say that a really important assessment that needs to take first before that software engineer says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and hire Adam because I'm busy being a great programmer and becoming an even greater one. And I have some extra money because these guys pay me a lot. So do I hire Adam? And I think at this point, the most important alignment that needs to take place, in my view, will be, what is Adam's worldview? What does Adam think will happen on a 6-month horizon, 12-month horizon, 36-month horizon, 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon? Heck, what's going to happen in the next 100 years, because I'm biohacking and I'm doing all the Brian Johnson stuff, and I've got a biological age of 22, and my testosterone is raging, and I'm waking up with morning firewood every single day. If that's me, so now, what am I truly believing that your worldview is something that is correct and aligned with what I believe to be true? Or am I willing to just outsource all that to you because I don't want to think about it, and for some reason I just think you're going to be more right than the others?
Yeah. Great question. So I will tell you, selfishly, right, the person who wants to manage your money in me says, just outsource it all to me. I'll do the thinking for you. But no, look, no intelligent person is going to outsource without asking a few questions. And this actually gets to a part of my practice that I love working with new clients on, because most people are used to financial advisors who are coming to them hat in hand saying, please let me be your advisor. Please let me manage your money. I came from tech, right? So it's no secret I've been in tech for a decade. Folks in tech are generally pretty well off, right? So I get to come to my clients and say, look, here's the deal. I want to make sure we are philosophically aligned. I want to make sure we are aligned on what you want, on how you view money, and on what my role is. And if there's not an alignment in our values, that's great. I'm not the guy for you, right? And what you want is a financial advisor who's confident enough in their ability to provide value that they can say, if you and I don't agree on these things, I'm not the guy for you, right? The last thing you want is a financial advisor.
So are you highly opinionated? Are you highly opinionated on a 36-month timeline about what's going to happen in the world in some contrarian way? Do you have a contrarian hot take on what will happen in the next 36 months in the world that isn't lemming thought?
Yeah. So For me, actually, what I look for when it comes to the kind of philosophical and personality fit is a couple things, right? One is I look for an abundance mindset in people. And what that basically says is there's enough to go around for everyone, and I don't have to make my dollar at the expense of someone else losing their dollar. That's a very important mindset to me because the last thing I want to do is deal with somebody who's in a what's called a scarcity mindset, right? And when humans get into a scarcity mindset, that's really where we start finding folks who are willing to make compromises that they should not otherwise make, right? When you think you're down to your last dollar, you're willing to do anything, right? And I want folks who have a mindset of there's going to be enough to go around. And that's a very common entrepreneur mindset. Most founders have an abundance mindset. Most venture capitalists have an abundance mindset. So a lot of folks in tech generally have an abundance mindset. The other thing I look for is someone who's willing to delegate and knows what they're the best at, right? So you are a great software engineer. I am a great wealth manager. Together, we make a great team, right? I'm not going to go on your website and tell you how to rewrite your application. You don't go into my portfolio and tell me how to reallocate stocks, right? We both do our thing that we're the best at. And, largely as a team, we're growing your money to meet your goals. And that's really kind of the third thing I look for is someone who has an idea of what they want to do with their money. Because getting rich for the point of getting rich is great until you're rich. And then you look back and you say, is this all there is? If you're familiar with the app Blind, there are a ton of people on Blind that will post up like, I'm 35 with a $5 million net worth. What do I do? It's like, well, you should have had something you wanted a $5 million net worth for, because otherwise you end up there.
Said.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did you hear about the Minecraft acquisition by Microsoft?
That was a number of years ago. Yep.
Multi-billion-dollar deal and super small team, right? Because it was pretty much built in the guy's basement, right? And then he brought in a small team eventually once they hit a certain degree of scale, because there was just this explosive viral growth. Mm-hmm. And then they get acquired by Microsoft, and this one guy makes just a ridiculous amount of money. So we're talking billions, or over $1 billion. And so this is like a one-man unicorn. It's not even like the founder of a unicorn. This is a one-man unicorn. And so he goes off to Ibiza and does the whole party circuit and sees all the girls and goes to all the clubs and hangs out with all the DJs and pops all the bottles of champagne and all that, all of that stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. And there's this very sad tweet that went out, a distressing tweet, where he complained about how difficult it was to find love, and it's like a life devoid of meaning, and you can't trust anyone anymore. And what then is there for me? I've got all this money. I can buy whatever I want, do anything I want, good, bad, whatever. But I've got so much that, like, what the hell's the point? And I think that what folks miss out on is that, and I repeat this refrain over and over, that which is most human, the thing that is most essential to each of us being a human being, is to create. The act of creation is what it is to be human. And if we're not creating something of value for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our community, for the world at large, at whatever scale it is, if we don't feel like we're in that process of creating, then there is a sadness that we collapse into ourselves upon. And that is tragic. And what you just described, how on Blind, there are techies, tech millionaires who are saying, well, what do I do now? I got $5 million. And the thing is, $5 million is a lot of money. Like that's but two comments on $5 million. On Succession, they say $5 million is like the worst amount of money for you. I think that was the specific number. Where what's the was it Cousin Greg? Cousin Greg, I think, was getting $5 $5 million from his grandfather or something like that, or from his uncle, whoever it is, some old guy with a lot of money, and then his cousins who are have multi-generational wealth. They say, "Oh, Greg, yeah, don't $5 million. That's like the worst thing you can do. You take $5 million and then you've got too much money to work because, well, then at that point, do you really want to have a boss? Do you really want to be doing the 9 to 5? And you just don't have enough money coming out of that $5 million to live this life." So that's one thing I'll say about $5 million.
Yes.
It's not the $5 million. It's what the $5 million gets you in returns each year.
Exactly.
I imagine. Extension of this is that, and probably the bigger and more important thinking is that money's important. It's really good to make money. It's every deal you close, every milestone you hit, those are that's good. You can do a lot of good with money. And money, who says money doesn't bring happiness? Yeah, money made in a healthy way does bring happiness. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And that doesn't mean that the Porsche brings happiness. That could be short-lived. But money made in a healthy and constructive way, where I am creating and delivering value to others, that feeds the soul. That feeds the soul. So it's while making money is good and wholesome and important, I think that the bigger win is truly the journey. And now I'm going to sound like I'm spewing some esoteric bullshit, right? It's the journey, not the destination. But really, genuinely, ing, creating, this is something that we can fall in love with and take true pride in. And I just wish there were more people that do take pride in whatever it is that they are doing in that moment. It's a rare trait these days.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on exactly what every software engineer loves to get into, which is, flow state, right? The state where you look at your monitor and it's 8 a.m. and you look at your monitor again and it's 3 p.m. and you don't know where the day went, but you've written code. And, for me, when I was a software engineer, that was utter bliss. And I will tell you the reason I'm in financial advising now is I found that same level of bliss when I'm making financial plans for people. It's the exact same flow state that I get into as when I was programming. It's a really cool thing to see that overlap, because I can spend hours in someone's financial plan, and it's fun. It's creating.
Well, when you're software engineering, you are imagining a complex structure, simplifying it into this moment, this action right now, but maintaining connection to this complex structure somewhere out in the future that does not exist yet. My colleague, co-founder, he describes it as gardening. So it's like including the weeding, maybe not the fire weeding, but the weeding, and the pruning and the nurturing and the watering, and what do you choose to water? Where do you choose to focus your attention? And so this act of imagining a thing that does not yet exist, a state that does not yet exist, it's there in my mind, and it's in the future. And in some ways, my mind is in the future. And one foot in the future, one foot in the present, and I am pulling that future closer to today in this moment. That same idea, I think, and I'm no financial guru, right? That same idea, I imagine, would apply to what you're doing, where you imagine a future state of the world, and you're making decisions today about how that world will unfold. And you mentioned Warren Buffett earlier, and you described how he kind of takes an active role in directing the companies, managing the companies. I would say that what Warren Buffett is doing is similar in some ways to what, to what an entrepreneur would do, in that he is not only predicting the future, he is pulling that future. He has an unfair advantage. He's making the future happen. So he predicts a version of the future that he views to be desirable and somewhat likely, and ideally somewhat contrarian, because that way the investment is affordable. And then he deploys his tremendous resources towards exerting his will upon the present day world and reshaping it to be that future state world that he's imagined. So that's one, a very, very active approach. And the other is to just make the right assessments of how the future will unfold, regardless of whether or not I'm taking an active, not active financial management, but active business role in making that happen. And that's actually why I'm actually in the camp of, rather than say an individual has a few $1,000,000 or a few $100,000 or a lot of millions of bucks, there's the idea of investing that money in other people's businesses. And there's the idea of truly investing in yourself. So myself, in this post-employment era, looking around and seeing how cognitive automation is starting to kick in, do we then end up in this place where maybe it's not at the Mag 7, right? Because those companies have just tremendous resources to be able to bring on, like OpenAI hired a bunch of finance bros and doctors and lawyers to come in and ontologize the work of those knowledge workers in order to deploy AI to perform those functions. And that's a temporary use of this knowledge worker labor. And then they automate it, and then they no longer need those people. And then they sell that ability to no longer need the people to other companies. In that world, does a software engineer at a mid-tier company that sees the writing on the wall, rather than actively investing or passively investing in other people's businesses, what about the idea of investing in your own business and growing your own brand, creating your own income stream? Is that something that your clients are contemplating?
Yeah, great question. And this is why I'm here as a wealth manager, because I came to that realization. And it was kind of a lucky realization a couple of years ago when I started in on the process. But I use AI every day in my practice. And as a former software engineer, I'm still not fully reformed. I still write code. So I actually, on my other monitor, because I have multiple monitors, I've got Cursor open right now, chugging through a website update, because I'm not going to update my own website. I'm going to have Cursor do that, right? So I'm living in that reality where, some of the cognitive and knowledge work is being done by AI. So what do you do in a world where you as a software engineer may not be able to perform your craft for somebody else? And I do think the answer is going to become more and more small companies, companies of one or two people, you and a friend who get together and say, how can we use our talents that we have to provide value in the world? I think what we're going to see, though, is a shocking realization. And again, coming as a software engineer, I've seen this time and again. If you get a back-end engineer to build a company, you will never launch a company, because the back-end engineer will write the perfect API, the perfect documentation, the perfect deployment pipeline, zero products, no marketing campaign, no concept of pricing, no billing integration, and then be surprised in a year when they're out of money, right? So I think what you're going to see is a bunch of folks coming from software who are used to creating, who suddenly now have to put a value on what they create and understand the finer points of how do you do business, right? How do you do marketing? How do you help someone understand that you're fulfilling a need without coming across as a salesman, right? Because I think every software engineer, at least the joke that I tell software engineers is, how do you know the extroverted software engineer? They're staring at your shoes, not their shoes. Right? Like we're a pretty introverted bunch of software engineers. And so sales kind of seems like this foreign, greasy thing. But the question becomes, how do you as an individual software engineer, convey that value that you're producing so you can go find a project that puts you back into flow state, right? So you can create so that you can be personally fulfilled and still make your rent or your mortgage payment, right? And I think that's going to be a question that a lot of folks in the knowledge industries are going to have to answer in the next few years. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And this prompts me to prompts me, not AI, prompts me to circle back to my earlier question, which I don't think we fully covered, and it's really important to me. On a 3-year horizon, because 3 years is and I picked 3 years because it's a really hard timeline. It's really easy to predict 20 years from now. It's really easy to predict an hour from now what's going to, a lot of things that'll happen, but it's actually quite difficult to have to put yourself out there and stake out a claim, a position, and you could be proven wrong. And I think that that's part of intellectual humility and the ability to improve your prescience on that 3-year timeline. But what are your contrarian views or your Dr. Adam Link hot takes on what the world will be like? What will characterize and define the world in the next 3 years?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned 3 years is a hard time frame to make a prediction on, so I will bet you $5 million, right? Which is also the worst amount of money, right? No, we're not actually betting real money here. Just in case anyone comes back in 3 years and is like, hey, guess what? You were wrong, and David needs to collect on a bet. No, I think in the next 3 years, here's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of AI taking over what has been the white-collar jobs. And I think we're going to see a large movement behind the concept of universal basic income. Because I think people are going to start to realize that in, like you said, this post-employment world, what do you do with yourself? And I think what we're going to see is people realizing that they need some sort of money, right? And there's going to be this idea of, well, why don't we just give everyone something? I don't know where it's going to come from, because it has to come from somewhere. And I don't know if it's going to be some sort of like a new AI tax or something like that we, create as humanity to say, well, you're putting us out of work, so you owe us something. You could see a world where...
Have you been hanging out with Bill Gates?
Gosh, if I was hanging out with Bill Gates, I'd have a lot more insight.
If you were hanging out with Bill Gates, you might be on the Epstein list, in the Epstein files.
Exactly, right? Oh, yeah. No, I'm not in those files.
Actually, baby, I shouldn't laugh at that, because there's, there are a lot of folks who are in a hard place in their lives that were, and that's the side of the story that folks forget to talk about when and to think about when they think about the Epstein files. The focus is generally on these super powerful, super wealthy men, whether or not there's any guilt, whether or not they just happened to be there because these were like some of the hottest, most attended events among the who's who. Mm-hmm. And for some of those, it's very, very, very likely that there was substantial unsavory intent and action that had taken place. But what a lot of folks forget to contemplate is that these were young girls that were in a formative period in their lives, who probably didn't have the support that they needed from their families and the community around their families and their and just society at large. They were abandoned, mm-hmm. and they were viewed as being very likely too troublesome to take care of, and so they slipped through the cracks and ended up embroiled in this seedy world where now all of that will follow them for, at least inside their own minds, for a very, very long time. And so I only say this because I just laughed about the whole Epstein thing and Gates. And
Yeah.
so I want to do a mea culpa and just remind myself not to laugh too much at that stuff.
Well, I think you hit on a very interesting human need, though, which is the need to feel some sort of a connection, right? So you kind of mentioned this, with the Microsoft acquisition of Minecraft and Mojang. You become a billionaire and you can't trust anyone, right? Because everyone's just after your money because they know you have enough of it. And at the end of the day, people are after your money because they need to survive, right? And so you end up in this world, which is what Epstein ended up catering to, which is human connection. And so when you talk about AI, right, and we're going to circle back to AI here, in a post-employment world, what do I think is going to happen in the next 3 years? I think we're going to see a spike in human loneliness that we haven't seen yet. And we're starting to see the beginnings of people interacting with AI as humans. And I will say, as a financial advisor, one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is my interaction with humans, because I think our key selling point in the future is going to be our humanity. And we saw this in the remote work when COVID popped up. All of a sudden, everyone was saying, hey, I feel kind of disconnected from my coworkers. I feel a little lonely. I'd been a remote worker long before COVID. And I basically told all my colleagues, yeah, welcome to my world. It's me and the dogs all day long, right? I don't see another human as a remote worker. And everyone's like, wow, this is kind of lonely, right? So there's point one, right? And then you start getting people who now no longer need money, right? Because they're either provided for in the basics or AI's taking the job or something like that. And you have another indication with the Epstein files of loneliness, right? And this idea that I just need human connection. And so then you also look at people already using AI to facilitate human connection and really becoming, romantically involved with AI. So I think what we're going to see in the next 3 years here is that trend's going to accelerate. I think if you're in, a therapy-related profession right now, it might be the golden age for you in the next 3 years as humans come to you with human problems. But I think one of the biggest things we have to remember is that humanity and being a human is going to be probably the biggest thing that we have in the next 3 years.
So on that last point, I agree quite strongly that human connection and human provenance will be highly sought after and highly valued. I think that in many cases, when it comes to the consumption of goods and services that do have verifiable or implied and believed human provenance will have this premium. That will be the new luxury, because I have conviction that all or very nearly all goods and services that are associated with the satisfaction of our physiological needs will have a massive decrease in cost that will make them effectively free. And so that is this post-scarcity environment that I project will take place on this, and I'm going to make this easy for myself, on like a 5 to 7 year timeline. So not as easy as a 20-year claim, but on that 5 to 7 years timeline, I believe post-scarcity will be upon us. But because of that, I want to tie this back to your comment about loneliness. While human provenance and alignment in goods and services will become the new luxury, I think that human companionship, human relationships will not be scarce. I believe we'll have an abundance of that, simply because today, when we view the way that people are spending their time to attend to their physiological needs, and let's set aside the top 10% in terms of wealth of the nation. And I'm going to talk about the United States in particular, because there are parts of the world that, for a lot of other reasons, that there are some crazy mechanics and imbalances and all that stuff, and massive rampant corruption. Like, people talk about Nick Shirley's discoveries of daycare centers in Minnesota that are fake and fraudulent and corrupt. Well, it's certainly alarming to me, but there are parts of the world that are like just the level of corruption is it defies imagination for those here in the U.S. Like it's hard to contemplate. So setting aside kind of rest of world, let's look just at the U.S. When it comes to the physiological needs and attending to them, people are spending somewhere in the range of 40 to 80 hours every week. 40 to 80 hours every week. More time than they are sleeping. And I'm factoring in commute times. I'm factoring in the wait times in between gig economy tasks. I'm factoring in time spent working. I'm factoring in overtime. So it's in the range of 40 to 80 hours per week, working to satisfy those physiological needs, to barely scrape by. Because even the upper middle class today, because inflation hit them as well, and they were already kind of at the upper limit of what they could afford. Many middle class families were living paycheck to paycheck, and now many are underwater, even upper middle class families. And so I think that when we have these goods and services that are associated with addressing our physiological needs have a massive decline in cost, what we then get is people need to work less or potentially not at all in order to attend to those needs. Food can become effectively free. So the idea of Billie Eilish and the United Nations saying, hey Elon, what the hell are you doing, bud? You got all this cash. You're like going to be a gazillionaire, not even a trillionaire. Solve this world hunger problem. What people fail to realize is that the approach of throwing money at the problem is grossly flawed for two reasons. One, it's tremendously difficult to deliver $1 in value at the cost of $1 to the person that needs it. So if you see a single homeless person, it's quite easy. It's physically possible to take a $1 bill and hand it to that individual. But if you imagine 100 million people globally that are undernourished, it is not possible to spend $1 to give $1 to all 100 million people. So there's this inefficiency that kind of doesn't go up in a linear way with the scale of giving. It's inefficiency that has step changes.
Exactly. Yep.
And maybe not exponential, but it's not pretty. This graph. It is not a graph that one who wants to give wants to understand. It pains the givers to understand that. So one, it's really hard to give them money. Two, I don't think there's enough money in the world for us to be, there isn't enough disposable income in the world for us to be, let's take all of the charitable giving in the world that takes place. If we sum it all up and try to throw it all at the problem of malnutrition and extreme poverty and hunger, there isn't enough of it to be sustainably solved through the simple act of giving. So the true solution is to affect if we think about it from the ground up, and set aside our emotions for a moment, because it's an emotional topic, right? When you see somebody who's starving, a child, of course it pains us. It pains everybody. But if you're truly interested in solving the problem, just as with anything important in life, it's important to set the emotions aside for a little bit and think about it rationally. The true solution is to address the underlying unit economics.
Exactly. Yep.
Of food, of hunger. And what are the unit economics of hunger? Well, it's the cost of farming, the cost of delivering the food. And if we can address those two things through farming at the edge, through the application of robotics in the field of farming, we can bring the cost of food down to something that is pretty darn close to zero.
Yeah.
For everybody. And it's this approach that I think will, and it's because we now have a number of very, very wealthy individuals and pockets of some governments that are recognizing that we need to set aside the emotion of it. And emotion plays a really important role in our society and in our lives. So I don't mean to say let's set it aside permanently. Heck, even Spock has emotion, right? And
human.
The emotion made him a better being.
Right.
So I think that the emotion is important, but it is important to also set it aside for a period of time where we're making these rational decisions about how to fix a problem. And when that happens, and I see it already happening, we're going to have the cost of food drop. We're going to have the cost of transportation drop from. So I'm in Andover, Massachusetts. If I want to take an Uber X into Back Bay in Boston, if I want to take an Uber X to the Prudential Center, it costs me typically, without surge pricing, $55. With autonomous driving, if I take the kind of price differential between Uber X and Tesla Cyber Taxi, is it, or Cyber Cab? Cyber Taxi, I think it is. If I take that multiple difference and apply it to Boston, that $55 ride will cost me probably $8, between $5 and $10. Now things start to get a lot more affordable. And say it's my car that I'm also sharing, I'm probably making money from that car when I'm not using it. So in this way, I think that many of our costs in day-to-day life come down to zero. Now, what does that mean for human relationships? It means that a lot of folks will just have a lot more time. And what then do we choose to do with our time? First and foremost, I believe we will spend time with others around us. We're just wired that way. Second, and that's just like it's autonomic. Like we just, it's like breathing, right? Second, we're thinking beings, right? And we're feeling beings. As we think and feel, and we're among others around us, we start to see various imbalances around us and within us, and we start to address that. And what is that? That is the act of creation. When you're addressing a problem, you're creating. And so I think that we will have very little loneliness, actually, on a 3-year timeline.
Interesting.
Very long, rambling, circuitous, but I think that I stacked that with linear logic. Just it was definitely a stack.
No, and I definitely appreciate the very well thought out logic that got us there. I think on the 3-year horizon, I disagree with you on loneliness. I think we're going to see a spike. I think over the longer term, 10 years, I think you're probably correct. If I had to bet money, and this is not investment advice.
$5 million, you said, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I would go all in on bowling ball manufacturers. My contrarian take here, I think bowling's coming back as a community sport. Used to be a big thing. I think your local bowling lane's going to be the new place to hang out. It's got just enough activity and just enough sitting for the average American. Plus, there's usually beer and pizza. But I think more broadly speaking, on the endemic of loneliness that we're going to see, I think you will see places like bowling alleys, like religion, like social clubs. I think that's where we're going to start spending our time more. That's what I think.
So I'll strongly agree with you on that potentially contrarian view. I think because we are wired to seek out others around us, and without that, it's quite depressing and difficult. Fundamentally, though, if we are creating, I think that others are naturally drawn to us. So rather than seeking it out, it comes to you. But setting that aside, bowling alleys and by extension, kind of golf. During the COVID pandemic, golf in South Korea surged. It like golf memberships, everything golf related. It was just because these were wide open spaces, and they said it's you're far enough apart from each other that it's got social distancing baked into it. So go ahead and golf all you want, guys. So it became like the number one sport in the country, and everybody pursued some form of golf, except for me. I've never really been a golf guy. I do enjoy walking on a golf course, just not holding the golf clubs. I think though that this idea of the bowling balls, it extends generally to any kind of skill-based physical activity that you can do in groups. And so I was actually at a batting cage a couple of days ago, and it was nice. It was run by I think some major league and D1 kind of coaches, athletes, and people around them, kind of adjacent to them. Fantastic facility. I was really, really impressed. But I thought to myself while I was there, watching my kid, this would be great as like a Topgolf experience. Like everything you get at Topgolf, like all the beers, the drinks, all of that, with a batting cage, and that same thing I thought would apply to bowling. So I was my brain lit up when you said bowling.
Yep.
And the same thing would apply to, like just it's like a batting cage, except soccer balls come out at you. And and maybe you kick them back at the thing, or just a lot of things where people can be a little bit active, not tremendously active, be a little bit competitive, spend time together, laugh with each other, have a meal, and there they said no sunflower seeds because they didn't want you spitting them, but maybe they serve sunflower seeds, whatever it is.
Exactly, right?
I think that these social experiences, you're absolutely right, will be a tremendous opportunity in the next 3 years.
Yeah. I personally, as someone who's been a remote worker for a lot of my career, I look forward to that. I think the social stuff's going to come back, and part of that, I think, is my own desire for more human interaction. We could be doing this in person instead of virtually, but who knows? Maybe in the next 3 years, So we'll see.
If we think back to the medieval, well, not even back, just 100 years ago, the salons that took place in Europe, where you'd have people in the community come together and have vibrant discussion. I actually think that the modern day salon is the podcast.
I like that take.
And I'm thoroughly enjoying. This is why I podcast. It's to sit down with folks like you. I think we've run a little bit over, so we should start to land the plane.
Yes. Yep.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think maybe we could cover one more topic. How about we touch upon UBI?
Yeah, universal basic income. Let's do it.
Well, first let's hear your take on how you think UBI might work. You left a pretty important part out. You said we got to figure out a way to pay for it, which is probably one of the most important things. Let's talk about how we might pay for it.
Yeah. So I will say this is the part where I have not fully thought through. So we're going to do this thinking live, and we're going to see how it turns out. Yep. On the other side on the receiving money, I will tell you. So
holding either of us to our opinions on this. We're exploring this in real time together with you guys.
Yep, exactly. When one of us runs for political office in the future, and somebody pulls this video up and says, "Well, you said this about UBI." Okay, guys, you can't hold me to that. I do think UBI is going to come from some sort of a tax. I think that getting UBI from a wealth tax, as some states have played around with, I think that's not the way to do it. I don't think that incentivizes the right behavior. I think what you have to do is you have to probably find a income-based tax that cuts into the profits being made by companies that are displacing workers. And this is a very difficult thing to do legally because you can't have a law that is targeted at any one individual. That's not really a thing that we do. So you'd have to find a way to, cordon off whether it be AI companies or tech companies or robotics companies or something like that.
But wouldn't everybody be using AI and therefore everybody should be taxed? And simply by increasing the tax, and I actually strongly disagree with this approach, but if you were to universally increase corporate income tax, which again, I strongly disagree with, at least in large, if we were to kind of step change or dramatically increase corporate income tax, I don't think that's the path forward. That would decrease competitiveness, which would just make the situation really bad for everybody. But let's say that we do go down that path and just levy an extra plus 10 percentage points corporate income tax on all companies. By virtue of increasing their tax, we make them less competitive, which forces their hand to become more competitive some way, somehow. And that broadly available mechanism to become more competitive is increasing automation, or maybe extremely in the other direction, increasing the human provenance, which thereby increases your luxury appeal. And say we did want to maybe encourage that adoption of human provenance, you could have like a tax rebate for companies that, because I think you can be targeted around tax rebates. Right. So we could do something for those companies that do feature human provenance into their offering. It'll be hard for those companies to attract people because I actually truly believe that a lot of folks aren't going to want many of the jobs that will be, like say waiters and waitresses. I believe that a lot of people won't want to be waiters and waitresses because it's actually a really hard job.
It's an incredibly hard job, yeah.
And I mean, a lot of people already today don't want to be kind of on the fields when it comes time to harvest the crop. It's a really, really, really hard job. These are in many ways dehumanizing jobs because ultimately you're also not paid enough to have anything resembling a middle-class existence. The kind of OG kind of mid-century idea of a middle-class existence, at least.
Right. Yep.
So I think even with a tax incentive, I don't think companies will have an easy time finding people to do those jobs.
Yeah, I certainly think it's something where a tax in its purest form is an expense. And so the reason I say a tax is the idea of creating a post-job society, post-employment society, is a benefit, right? But the cost of that is you have to do something with the humans. And so a cost in business is an expense. And so in order to put that expense on somebody's profit and loss statement, the government has to place it there because the government is a collective action that the people are doing, and a collective action from the government to put something on an expense on a P&L is called a tax, right? So that's how I get to it's a tax, right? You have to put a tax on it because you collect from everyone and then redistribute it. That's what taxes are meant to do. It offsets the negative externalities that are being incurred by society by an individual company. And we can go down.
There's a really big difference, though, in the fundamental idea of redistribution between, like, the scope of redistribution between the Soviet Union of yore and the United States. Right. So I just watched, I think, a movie related to the Soviet Union, or it was a miniseries with it was Archangel with that James Bond guy whose name I can't remember. Anyhow, it was communist era, and redistribution in that way, I think, is terrible because never have we seen that work. I think that redistribution in like the kind of Western typical democratic / and capitalistic societies has been tightly scoped distribution of some essential services.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And largely then the private sector takes over distribution of non-essential services, and it's a competition to see who can do it the most efficiently, right? And create enough profit that you can continue to reinvest that profit into producing those services for the long run. Like I said, we're thinking through this live, and there is, I think this is the problem with the UBI that we have yet to solve, is where does the money come from in a way that incentivizes all the parties appropriately.
So I think that if we make it a tax, if we fund it through an increase in taxes, and we're aiming to kind of not maximize the distribution of some UBI, but think about it in terms of increasing the amount to match people's expectations. Because I think that their expectations, especially in the next 3 years, certainly within the next 3 years, because people expect, like if they're thinking, say you're in the Boston area and you're thinking, I need to make a living, and I got all these expenses. A lot of people are going to say, well, we need UBI of $250,000, $500,000. They're going to pick some ridiculous number. So there's really almost no end to that, because there's almost no end to want. So I think that UBI might actually, if we take that approach of just saying, hey, let's raise the taxes, it's a slippery slope, because it takes agency away from people. And again, it's really important to structurally design this, set the emotion aside, and structurally design our society in a way that encourages that which is most human. I truly believe that creativity is that which is most human, and a physiological need is that connection, right? And we're wired that way for a lot of reasons, but that's like wiring. It's not like the essence. So if we were to try to design it for those two things, or even just creativity, but because a lot of folks might not agree with this idea of to create is that which is most human, and a lot of folks will focus on the physiological of, young men are going to be thinking, I need a mate, right? I have to become sexually active. I need to find a partner, and it's just like it's wreaking havoc on their on all of their insides. And so if we were to focus there, I think that UBI would have this tremendously emasculating effect on young men. I think that it would disincentivize, if we were thinking of it in terms of let's fund it more, let's create and let's tax everybody more in order to fund it. Let's tax the productive people in order to fund it. I think that this becomes a very, very slippery slope that leads to bad outcomes for this.
Yeah.
I think that the alternative approach is something that you mentioned earlier. Just a ton of wisdom coming from you. You mentioned that in this post-employment economy, you project that there will be more solopreneurs, companies of one, more small teams. Because if we think about the dynamics of white-collar jobs apocalypse, my language mangling is not working right now. This jobs apocalypse that's coming to white-collar workers and is already evident in the restrained hiring that's taking place among entry-level knowledge workers.
Mm-hmm.
It's already upon us, and those same technologies that are the driving force for this turning off of the tap. And what does it take? Like 3 turns the tap to turn off the tap? I think we're on turn like 1.5, and you already see a dramatic reduction in the flow of water when you turn the tap 1.5 times. That's what's happening. That's where we are right now. And I think in this situation, it is very, very clear that the technologies that are leading to that are the exact same technologies that turn the solopreneur and the small team into a superpowered team. Those are the exact same technologies that a back-end engineer with Cursor can now get an extra 30% productivity out of himself. I think that's like a moderately conservative take on what most highly competent back-end engineers will be able to, like 20 to 30% output increase. And as things start to improve, as there's increased availability, like Cursor raised $900 million, what was like 6 months ago, and then more recently. They have the money to bring in a whole bunch of software engineers, high-end software engineers on short-term contracts, suck the ontology out of their brains, and create these highly opinionated kind of super templates. Because it's not like template was always very rigid and deterministic in terms of what you can put into it and get out of it. But now these templates can benefit from the fuzzy intelligence of a large language model at some of these inflection points, which means these templates or these highly opinionated systems can become actually probably 5 times more impactful. And then as technology develops, maybe it becomes 10, 100 times more stretchy. And once you get to 100x, that means now we can actually, it's viable on a cost basis to invest in the development of 1,500 templates that have 100x stretchiness. And that should cover probably 67%, 6-7 of the use cases. And so in that world, now we go from a 30% performance increase to maybe a 10x performance increase. And then that mythical 10x engineer that early stage startups can never seem to find, except for us. I think we found 4 of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
I think that it becomes very possible for that engineer to start their own business and compete head to head, toe to toe with TikTok. It becomes eminently possible for the chef at an up and coming restaurant, a line chef, to open their own self-driving food truck.
Right.
To open their own self-driving, self-cooking food truck where they are bringing the super critical human touch to it by making really important decisions about the provenance of the ingredients and the freshness and the soil in which the vegetables were grown, like how much sunlight, humidity, like which region of the world does it come from, all that. And then we start to see tremendous innovation just explode. I would love to see SYSCO, SYSCO, die a sudden death. The company, they are single-handedly responsible for the not even just mediocre, but like the enshittification of restaurants across the United States. And I think that if we empower these small-time chefs, these humans, to create, then they're going to make better food available to more people. And combine that with edge farming. Heck, they could have they could program an entire crop with like all the ingredients they need right there.
Yeah.
So just all sorts of automations and kind of refactoring of the value chain becomes possible and becomes necessary because people are bursting inside saying, I want to do this better. I like that guy in The Bear, like he just really, really, and Sydney in The Bear, like she just really, really needed to make better food. Yeah. It was intrinsic to who she was. For these people, they'll have almost superhuman ability. And I think that the answer to the UBI question is less how do we fund it, more how do we ensure that the situations where somebody needs some cushion in the downturns when things don't work out, because this path of creation is fraught with kind of iteration, right? And each iteration, if we think of it as hypothesis, experiment, measure, kind of analyze, hypothesis, and so on and so forth, and loop that over and over again, each time you fail, like it becomes almost antithetical and also just misaligned with my physiological needs to acknowledge failure. Because I need this to work. It has to work. Oh, it didn't work? Oh, no, we can't accept that. Ignore that it didn't work. Failure becomes this physiological allergy that we have because simply we need to put food on the table, right?
Yep.
We have to put food on the table. And so I think that when costs come down and when enabling technologies become more prevalent, we see more, less compromise on the value chain, more experimentation and more innovation. So I think that if we drive that, what happens is there are fewer of these downturns for the individual, but they exist. And so even current spending levels, I imagine, with the broad decrease in cost of goods, in cost of living, because again, these physiological inputs will generally come down to somewhere close to zero, or at least 5 to 10x less. It's less money that's needed to cater to people when they hit those downturns or those failures. So the challenge, in my view, is less about how we fund it. It's twofold. One, how do we encourage more of this type of activity? How do we structure our society to drive that which is most human? Creation and connection. And two, how do we measure and identify people when they hit those downturns? And how do we help them in those downturns? These are I think, the two bigger questions.
Yep.
A lot of bleeding hearts will terribly disagree with me, though.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I will say, I hate to cut us off in the middle of a great discussion here, but speaking of physiological needs, I don't know if you've seen my dog.
You gotta go.
But
hey, guys.
My dog has to go out. So I think we are going to be limited by my dog's bladder size. And so she needs to go outside. I got to go let her out. But
all right.
Yeah,
Dr.
David,
Adam Link, Fireweed Capital, lovely to speak with you. Let's stay in touch.
Likewise, David. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great one.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Bringing my vision into reality requires focus. But the reality for an entrepreneur is that there's just so much work to be done. Finance, customer support, and marketing. Vanka AI is the agentic co-founder that cuts the mundane out of the founder's day-to-day. If you're a founder or business operator who values your time, you really need to sign up right away at www.vanka.ai.